Transition, the process of change from one condition to another.
We are now at a new crossroad where change is evident once again.
What does not serve us must transform us anew.
Returning to our original state of oneness and true nature of that which created who we truly are.
Confusion was the way of the past. Enlightenment is the way of the now and future, shedding away the layers of deceit.
We now bring you the transformation of the two who started as one. Our fearless planet never stands still.
Earth has been in a process of transition, and we are not exempt from this remarkable, ongoing reality. Well, hello, and welcome to Transitions Radio Show. We'll talk with the Cummings. My name is Mark.
And I'm Lena, and I wanted to thank you guys for joining us for this show. It's going to be an amazing show. We're going to have some wonderful perspectives from a mom of a young teen who is considering transition.
Yes, and many of you have heard the condition called ROGD, which many in the trans community have denied it exists, but we know that it's actually a fact. And we'll go into all that a lot deeper. But right now, let's introduce our guest. First, we're going to give you a little short bio. Today, we have Taylor, who is a 42-year-old mother of two. She has a 13-year-old daughter who identifies as transgender and has expressed her need of wanting to be a boy. Taylor is a domestic abuse advocate and survivor and campaigner.
Originally, Taylor had affirmed her child because she was worried that if she didn't, her child could be a statistic with the much feared trans propaganda of suicide. Now, she is going back on this after careful consideration and seeing what the outcome of transition brings. Their child who is struggling with this.
Exactly. And now let me go ahead here. It's like, and welcome to the show, Taylor.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, Taylor.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that there's a lot of parents out there that are going to be extremely thrilled that they're going to have a voice, because as you speak, as a mother's perspective, it's like other mothers who have been silent, who haven't known where to turn, have a little hope of hearing that there's others like them. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your perspective.
No,
Is there anything that you would like to mention as far as your bio that we didn't mention? I know that you are a domestic abuse advocate and survivor, and you campaign against that. Is there any other things that our audience would need to know about you?
No, I don't think so. I think that's kind of my life at the moment, or has been for the last 4 years or so, sadly. I'm very much active and involved in raising awareness and campaigning for survivors of domestic abuse, particularly those that go through the family court system here in the UK and in the States, and the criminal justice system. I do a lot of protesting and a lot of raising awareness on social media and things and various talks. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. But I'm kind of breaking into this whole side of things now, and it's starting to kind of take over the other stuff. But well, I wish it wasn't, but there you go.
So I always like to dive in deep and try to understand what led to said conditions, get a feeling of the person's beginnings and how things started. So let's start off by telling us, what type of relationship did you have with your daughter prior to her ROGD experience?
Oh, very good relationship. We're very close to both my daughters. Growing up, I was the stay-at-home mom. I was always there doing the school runs and things. I did everything for them. The three of us were very, very close. And then even after my marriage broke down, really, really close to both my daughters. They lived with their dad for a period of time, but we spent a lot of time together. I had good amount of contact. And then they wanted to come and live with me. My eldest came home to live with me at Christmas 2020, and my youngest last summer. And we were still really, really close. Of course, I was affirming my eldest at that point when she came home, or around that sort of time. That's when the trans thing came out. But I've always been, I'm such a liberal parent. I'm probably too laid back, and probably was more like their friend, I suppose, which, looking back was not a good idea. But when there's a breakdown of relationships and things, it does become really, really hard to know how to parent, and you feel for your children, you know what they're going through. You're all going through a tough time, and I felt like I was sort of holding them up, but really I probably was wrapping them up more than holding them up, looking back.
Being a parent is not easy. I want to go ahead and share, for those who have not heard what rapid onset dysphoria actually is. Go ahead and
Rapid onset of gender dysphoria that occurs in the context of peer group and online influences may represent an entity that is distinct from the gender dysphoria observed in individuals who've been previously described as transgender.
the worsening of mental well being and parent child relationships, peer groups dynamics, and behavior that isolate teens from their parents, families, non transgender friends, and mainstream sources of information are particularly concerning.
More research is needed to better understand this phenomenon, its implications, and scope.
And that's definitely very true. There's a lot more research that needs to be done. And I think what's held back that research is the negation of the fact that there is such a thing as rapid onset gender dysphoria. What are your views on that, Taylor?
Yeah, I definitely think that it exists. I was completely unaware of it until quite recently, until I found a really supportive Facebook group after being in so many that were very uh, affirming, and then finding myself becoming more and more distant from them in my story. And it was the Facebook group that I'm in now, which is for concerned parents of transgender questioning children, or something along those lines. If you pop that into the search, or I can send you a link after this. It's a great group. And they pointed me towards the likes of GenSpect, Transgender Trend. Obviously, I'm UK based, so those are two UK charities. There's also one in America that is Partners for Ethical Care, whose founder runs the Facebook group. And they introduced me to the term, and then I read Trans by Helen Joyce, and then I read obviously Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, and it just horrified me, really, really opened my eyes, and that was a big turning point. And my daughter ticks all the boxes for ROGD, definitely, and so do so many other girls that I know.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the term hive mind comes to mind here, and with this, and we were speaking about it, how the social media has literally turned society upside down. It really has. And well,
Well, I mean, I was on, there's a Facebook group that is like an affirming, I guess, for people who have friends or family or young ones who are now identifying as trans or whatever. Um, I'm just appalled at how affirming people are from the very, very, very beginning. Instead of saying, hold on, put the brakes here, let's think about this. Does your child have any other issues that they're dealing with? Do they have any obsessive compulsive disorders? Do they have any type of ADHD issues? Do they have any family problems? Have they been molested? Have they been abused? I mean, are they, there's so many, adverse childhood experiences that we all know exist. that really do formulate a lot of the foundation for the gender confusion that we find in these young kids. But the first thing that they want to do is affirm people. And
Yeah.
it's dangerous. It
I
really
I
is.
can sympathise with that though, because the first thing I did, my sort of instinct, if you like, well, it wasn't really an instinct because I went against my instinct, but my first reaction was to affirm and to. I don't ever look back and think I was sort of one of these glitter parents, that I latched onto this trend for my own sake, but I did affirm because I didn't know an awful lot about the trans ideology and how it was overtaking certainly the young kids. But also, I'm very liberal. I love LGB and the community. I've got lots of gay friends. I grew up in my past life. I was an entertainer. I was a singer and dancer and worked around the world doing that. So I know a lot of gay men from my old career. Love them all to bits. And so I just thought that this was an extension. And because she'd started off, she didn't go directly down the trans route. She did start off with this. She thought that she was bisexual. She thought she was lesbian. Then it was trans.
I'm sorry.
Hold on
We
one
had some
second.
music just
Some
start.
music. Start playing. Okay, there
Goodness
we go.
gracious.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and she went down the lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, and then it was sort of non-binary, and I didn't really know much about that. I just sort of looked it up, and you know, if you Google these things as well, you tend to be steered more towards the affirmation sort of thing. But for me, I don't know whether it's the area in the UK I live, because I have heard some horror stories from UK residents, but our local school and local doctors aren't, rushing to affirm. If anything, our GP was more wary than me. And when I was sat there in one of the appointments, to put her on the pill because she found her periods really traumatic and triggering, he was sort of, I don't know, and well, let's try this. And then a few months later, when we were back in the surgery, and I was talking about a referral to the Tavistock clinic, and I did say to the GP, I understand it's a really long waiting list, and I assumed that there would be lots and lots of therapy before any medicalisation took place, because I was always sort of very mindful of going down any kind of medical route. And she said, yes, but I've only done one other referral to them, and she phoned me about 2 weeks later and said, I'm having trouble filling out this referral form. I need a couple of more questions answered. Are you sure you want to do this? So they were sort of my saving grace as well. And then when my daughter moved home, she obviously moved school because I live in a different area to her dad. And she came out just before the school transfer. And when we went to see the school, I introduced her under her male name and her male pronouns and said, I remember saying, this is how she identifies currently, but, we'll see how things go. But she would be more comfortable to identify like this. And they were a bit sort of taken aback. They said, oh, we've never really come across this much, so it's all new to us. But yeah, okay, we'll do whatever you want us to do. And so I have a tremendous amount of guilt now that I was the one pushing all of this rather than it being pressed onto me, if you know what I mean. But it came, I like to think it came from a good place of, I just thought trans is just like gay. And now I know that they couldn't be more different. In fact, today during our argument, my daughter actually said, we trans people, we hate the LGB. We hate them as much as we hate cis people. And I thought, yes, you're right, because they don't like you either.
I'm bringing up that point. I wanted to share this. Let's see if it goes here. Let me look at it from here so I can read it. What people don't understand, because there's so many different dynamics to all of this, and the different types of diagnosis or the different types of phenomenons that are taking place. You look at the diagram on the left from rapid onset gender dysphoria. There is this. It's almost like, and they do it like they, meaning the girls, kind of feed on each other, and then you've got those individuals that are like placing information on these young girls' psyche and their brains. Like if we look at transition will help treat my depression and anxiety. They believe that they're depressed and anxious because they need to transition. And then it continues by saying maybe you have seen the signs that you had paid more attention because they're trying to, blame the parent, the mother, the father, stop calling me and my boyfriend lesbians. He's 2 years on T for F's sake. I'm not even attracted to girls. It's like this self-hatred that's just projecting on other people, right? And as we see, mom, I need this to live. I mean, they really like try to feed on your emotions, and as a scared parent, I'm sure that is very manipulating. Do you want my dysphoria to kill me? And these are
Mhm.
words that aren't their own words. I truly believe that this is just what they've heard other people say and what the actual propaganda is, and it just goes on and on. They call people transphobic, and they call the medication life saving when in actual fact it hurts their health. Versus what they call the transgender, which I guess is more of the gender queer. They're not so much about medicalizing. I think it's a very different scenario.
Yeah, I think that it's more like, they think you don't even have to have any kind of discomfort or incongruency with your gender
Mm-hmm.
to be trans, that you could just, we were talking earlier before we got on the air here about, this kind of lost boy, kind of like soft boy type of look that they're going for, where they don't really want to be a bearded, masculine type presenting man, but they just want to be more masculine in their presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that, Taylor?
Yeah, yeah, I've heard all the scripted stuff. She always denies to me that she's picked it up from anywhere, and she denies that she watches any, what I call trans rights activists online and what have you. But she does, she comes out with the same as what everybody else's kids come out with, almost word for word. And it is really, really manipulative. And I have now gone down that road of saying, you're really manipulative, you're gaslighting me. You can't honestly believe all of this. But I've also spoken to her about, if she became a man, you know, she would have X, Y, and Z. She would probably start balding because it's hereditary on both my side and her father's side of the family. But she's like, yeah, bring it on. And I want a big mustache and I want to curl it up at the sides. And we were watching a movie the other night, and one of the male characters had the buttons undone on his shirt, and he had this big hairy chest, and I went, oh, I hate hairy chests in men. And she's like, oh no, it's well fit, and I'm just like, because that's another thing as well, she's a gay man, she likes boys, so she wants to be a gay man, and it's like, surely it's just easier just to be a straight girl, and then you don't have to do anything to yourself. But she says that she finds the thought of straight sex repulsive. And I'm like, well, you're 13. You shouldn't be thinking about anything like that right now anyway. But she just seems to have an answer for everything.
Right, and if you wrap your head around that statement, she identifies as a gay man and finds straight sex appalling. It's like, what do what does she think she's going to be having if she's with another man? But it's like
I think
this
she's done her
mental
research.
gymnastics.
I know, I know. Well, she's got this dream about what her penis is going to look like as well, and she's she's done the research, to be fair. I mean, she taught me a few things. She told me that it's formed from the skin, from the forearm and everything, and told me all about it, but said it in such a way that's like, oh, it's really, really simple. They just take some skin off your arm and they just mold a penis, and there you go. It's the real deal. It'll do everything you need it to do. You know, but
She
then
she
when I started
needs
doing research, I thought, oh my God, this is horrific.
She needs to write about a YouTuber that we discovered recently. His name is Finn, and he's in the UK,
yeah.
Uh-huh.
and he's in a mobility scooter now. due to chronic fatigue syndrome.
From all the
He had the
surgeries.
phalloplasty. He had all the revisions done, and he was very, very much in favor of all those things. But now he's finding himself like aging so much. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what happens a lot with females that take tea for extended periods of time, is that the aging process, and it happens with male to females as well.
Hmm.
The estrogen ages you. It's like a window of 5 to 10 years maybe that you get,
Right.
for
Hmm.
you to live your glamorous new self life. But after that,
Yeah, it's all downhill.
yeah.
Have her watch a lot of the health complications. It is not as simple as they're making it out to be.
Phalloplasty is a very complicated procedure, and
Mm.
it involves like, there's like necroticness that can develop from this the scraping of that flesh and the different. I mean, it's like it's
And the
crazy.
complication, because they're trying to create a urethra from unnatural means. So there's always fistulas, there's always infection. I'm going to be having on our show Scott
Nugent.
Nugent, and
Yeah,
he talks a lot about the complications. And like Scott, there's many, many. I'm thankful I never went that route because I did my homework and I saw a lot of my friends who had complications. I was like, not for me.
yeah,
But it's not no fun really.
I think that what's happened is that, you've got so many of the youth going to TikTok to watch these kids talking about how this is my voice on tea, this is my voice on tea, this is my, and all the different stages of their transformation or whatever, where they become more masculinized, and they get like this like concocted idea that it's just as simple as that, and that it's like some kind of glamorization of
Yeah.
it.
yeah. I think all kids like to simplify uh, anything in life. I suppose anything seems achievable, and everything seems easy at that age. If you believe it, you can be it, you can do it. But the reality isn't like that, and you either go down the path of complete transition and, like you say, suffer the consequences of all the medical issues and stuff, or you stop at a certain point. And I don't want to sound like I'm insulting anybody, but then you're kind of half and half, and then
Mhm.
you're still not really living your authentic self in either way either. I suppose, I don't know. I mean, I'm saying that as I say, a cis person. I hate that using that term, but
Oh
as a
no.
natural born female, I mean, you guys would be able to know more than that, than me.
And
But
we do, yeah.
Well, for someone who's lived this since 2003 when I transitioned, there's whether you go all the way or halfway, there's never a true, like, in my opinion, authenticity because having had to do all these things to yourself, it's all synthetic and it has ramifications. And that's one of the things that I advocate for is people realizing, do you realize what you're getting yourself into? And you're not getting what you're paying for. You think you're, it doesn't have to be a 13-year-old's mind, even an adult mind. We create all these scenarios in our brain. We're dreaming because we're trying to run away from their true problems. And in that dream phase, we create all these wonderful scenarios. But when reality hits and when things are all said and done, it's not as glamorous as it appears to be. And that's the voice that I'm trying to be out there for these young kids, women, men that think that they're going to get something great out of this.
mm,
And some people may achieve somewhat what they want, but there's no utopia. You
no,
know.
Well, you lose your purpose and sense of where you where you are as a human being in society, as a person. Because, it doesn't matter whatever you do, your original purpose isn't being fulfilled, so you don't have like the I guess you think that life is going to be better because you're going to be out of your cage of, your gender dysphoria, and you're going to be able to express yourself how you want to express and be seen as you want to be seen. But in doing that, you basically kind of like created a deeper prison for yourself, because now your functionality and your role as a person in life is now very limited. Like you said, we're like halfway between wherever wherever it's like the state of limbo,
Mhm.
you know, basically.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Yeah, it's really hard to get your head around, isn't it? Really. I mean, now that I've peaked well and truly, and I've done the research that I've done, and yeah, I know where Scott Nugent as well, and I've reached out to him on Twitter. He's amazing, and signed up to his charity. I just find it so hard to see it from my daughters and all her friends and any other trans youth I know from their perspective. You know, I always pride myself in being empathic and being able to see it from other people's point of view, and that, you know, and I'm very much that kind of person. But as much as I try, I just think, why are you deliberately going headlong into limiting yourself in so many ways and for what? um yeah, it's really, it's hard for me to get my head around. It truly is. But she
So
just
like for
still so
you, I'm
determined.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying she's still so determined. It's it just
Yeah.
gets me angry now. I find myself shouting at her most of the time these days, which isn't healthy.
I mean, as a parent, you go back to like when you were 12, 13. What year was that for you? Like, I mean, did
Early
like,
90s, and I tell you what,
okay,
I was
so
I was a tomboy for about 3 years, from about the age of 11, 12 to about 14, 15. I was a tomboy. I was a late developer, and so I was a bit ashamed by the fact that I didn't have any boobs like my the rest of my female friends did, and stuff like that. And so, you know, I wore baggy clothes to sort of hide the fact that I hadn't developed, if you like. Most of my friends were boys. I liked climbing trees, you know, and skateboarding and hanging out in graveyards and other weird stuff. So God knows what, if I was 13 now, what, and I've always been very, very headstrong and very stubborn and opinionated. That's one of the reasons why I think me and my eldest clash, because we are very similar. And I would have been completely wrapped up in this ideology if I'd have been 13 today. I mean, thank God I was 13 in 1992, where it just wasn't heard of. I think, you know, the worst thing that we were doing to ourselves when I was that age was smoking and drinking. And I didn't really partake in the drinking bit. I did start smoking at a young age, and I still do. So that's a big regret. But it's to the point where I've even told my daughter, you know, I'd rather find a bottle of vodka in your bag or cigarettes. In fact, the other day I found a vape in her bag. She'd gone to youth club, and so I thought I'll go through her school bag. I was actually going through her school bag to just have a look at her some of her schoolwork, because I'd watched this YouTube video that, you know, the schools were teaching gender ideology and stuff like that, and I wanted to see if there were any notes on it. And I did not expect to come across a vape. Um, but I was really quite laid back about it. She got back from youth club, and I'd taken the vape out of the bag and put it on the fireplace. And I went up to her bedroom and I just knocked and I just held them up and I said, "What's this?" And I just said to her, you know, I said, "I started smoking at your age, and my mum is a smoker. She always has been." I said, "And I found that the way they dealt with it, you know, coming down on me heavy and saying, 'You will not smoke,' and grounding me all the time. My mum shouting at me whilst she had a cigarette in her hand. I just found it so hypocritical, and it just didn't work. And it did the reverse, I think, for me, and made me want to rebel even more. And I had that in my mind, and I thought, no, I'm not going to go down that road because it didn't work for me. And so I said, you know, just please be open with me. Don't, you know, she's promised me that it didn't have any nicotine in it. And I just said, look, I'm going to let you keep it because I know that if I take it off you, within a week, you're going to have a new one from somewhere. But I want you to know that I am aware that I'm not happy. I am disappointed, but that, you know, it's what teenagers do. There's rites of passage that you are going to partake in, whether I like it or not. But I am, you know, I'm aware, and I'm here for you if ever you need to talk, you know. But that seems to not be good parenting either, according to my daughter. So I'm at a loss, really, of what way to go.
It's not easy to be a parent. Like I said, there's not a manual, and I think parenting styles have had to change throughout the years. Now, looking back, were there any clear signs prior to her revealing this to you? Was there anything, especially like maybe that you could expose for other parents that might be seeing some of these same signs? Were there anything in particular that maybe, you know, you could share with us in our audience that might shed a light that maybe they could do things a little differently than how you did when you saw these signs?
Yeah, well, there was certainly trauma. I didn't know the full extent of the trauma, but certainly, obviously, when her father and I first split because it was an abusive marriage, he took me to family court very quickly after I fled the area with the children, and got custody within 3 days of me fleeing. So I had no opportunity to state my case. That's quite common, unfortunately, in family court throughout the world. People don't want to believe that it happens, but it does. Abusive fathers do have an upper hand in family court. I can tell you that now from a personal experience and professional experience. And so they were, although I still had a decent amount of contact, they were, ripped away from me as their primary carer, if you like. And he became their primary carer. And that definitely changed the dynamic and changed their life, really. Although, he's their father, he's always been their father, he's always been around. It put them into a scenario that they were alien to. And then he moved in with his girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend, and her children. And according to, well, both my children really, but particularly my eldest, it was a very toxic environment, in her words. And she didn't get on with her sort of stepmother, if you like. Obviously didn't get on very well with her dad still. Her dad sort of sided more with his girlfriend than with the children, which made it very hard on them. But the main one, that led her to first come out as trans and identify as male, was her stepmother's eldest child, who is a female, but now is a male because she's trans too, but she was a female at the time. Sexually assaulted my daughter in my daughter's bedroom in the house just before the Christmas. And she ran away from the home the night after, told me all about it. A social worker went round, and unfortunately, she was made out by the rest of the family to have made it up and to be lying. And the social worker didn't look into it any further. And that was a really, really big traumatic moment for her. But since then, about late last year, so September, October last year, so she'd been home for about 9 months. She'd been identifying as a boy for about a similar amount of time, maybe a couple of months less. She confided in me that a female friend of hers that lived on the same street as her dad in his old house when he got custody started sexually molesting her and grooming her whenever they were alone together over a period of about 6 months to a year, until her dad moved in with this girlfriend. And that kind of more light bulbs went off then. And I thought, gosh, she's been traumatized ever since her father and I split. Shortly after that, she was thrust into the primary care of her father, then groomed by and sexually molested by this older girl on the street, then forced to live with a stepmother that she didn't get on with. It was quite toxic. And then was sexually assaulted by that woman's eldest daughter. I mean, it's just, lots of stuff that no child should ever have to deal with. A lot of it, unfortunately, was out of my control. That's the sad part. Obviously, I didn't want to give my children up, and that was thrust upon me. And then whatever happened at her father's house, I'm 2 hours away from there. It was beyond my control. Doesn't stop me feeling guilty about it though. Guilty as hell. But I mean, I said once to some people shortly after I fled, that my kids paid the price for my freedom, and I still believe that my kids well and truly paid the price for my freedom. Um,
That's unfortunately one of the things that I've done a lot of research in all of this is that the majority of us that identify as trans and have transitioned, we deal with a lot of trauma, sexual abuse, all sorts of different situations that make us want to like hide, run away, and kill the person that we are. We, many of us hated who we were. So it's almost like a witness protection program, and we create these characters to hide the pain. And it's the only way we know how, you know?
yeah.
So it's pretty sad.
So your daughter, was it during the pandemic that things started to progress more?
Yeah, I would say so. It was right at the beginning of lockdown when her father moved in with his girlfriend. Um, he first moved into her house right at the beginning so that they could form their own bubble. And he could still see his girlfriend. So he just sort of he kept the family home, but just sort of packed a suitcase and moved in with her. And then while they were living together in her house, they went house shopping, and then bought a bigger house for all seven of them. I don't know. She's got three, two, five, six, yeah, seven of them. So yeah, it all unfolded very, very quickly. And then, in this country, I don't know how it was in America, but we had three lockdowns in total. So we had one very, very quickly at the end of March 2020. So they were out of school from then until the summer holidays, really. And then they went back to school in September for all of about a month. And then we had a second lockdown towards Christmas, and then it sort of lifted a bit over Christmas, and then we were thrust into another one in January. I mean, it's very strange. It's a bittersweet memory for me because it was lockdown that allowed her to reach out to me, um, and get the courage to speak up and want to come home. Because with no school going on, I managed to talk my ex into letting me have 50-50 because they were home learning or homeschooling, and he had to work, so he wasn't really going to go against that anyway. It did him a favor, I think. But they spent a lot more time with me than what they would have done if they had been in school as normal. And then when the sexual assault happened just before Christmas, lockdown then came in the January, so they spent Christmas with me, and then she had the excuse then to not go back straight away. So she, every few days, she kept messaging her dad and saying, "Can I stay with mum a little bit longer? Can I have another week? I can log on to the school programs from here. Can I have another week? Can I have another week? Can I?" And then by about mid-February, she then, said, "Dad, I want to live with mum. I'm staying here. I'm not coming home. I'm not coming home." Um, and yeah, her being out of school allowed that to happen. So it is bittersweet, but I know that lockdown has been huge for so many teenagers. Um, just not having that social aspect in their lives anymore, not having that routine, um, and just being at home and being online. Yeah,
Yeah,
horrible.
too much free time. So when you were experiencing a lot of the abuse from your ex husband, she obviously witnessed a lot of that, and I'm sure got
Yeah,
affected by it.
yeah. She says that she knew things that were going on. I like to think that because it wasn't your stereotypical, being physically abused, being punched, thrown down the stairs, and he never used to shout or anything like that. It was all very, it was coercive, controlling behavior, all very manipulative, and it was very much domineering. He was very domineering. He was a head worker, so it was a lot of crazy making. So certainly the last few years of my marriage, I was on antidepressants. I was on antipsychotics at one point because he had me believing that I was severely mentally ill, that I was seeing things that weren't there, thinking things that weren't there, that I was paranoid, that I was just completely nuts, and that I should be grateful that he was sticking with me because no one else would. And, he was the only one that could fix me. He'd separated me from my family by then. So I had no outlet, no support system in place. And I look back now and I think, God knows what the kids must have thought of looking at me. I mean, I like to think that to the outside world, I passed myself off as functioning as best I could, but I don't know. I mean, my youngest one, despite the fact that she has learning difficulties, she's very, very astute. And I remember her saying to me once and said, Dad was like your puppet, mummy, and you were like a puppet on his strings. And I thought, wow, that's very poignant. And that's, wow, how does she know that, and how does she think to say it like that? It really took me aback because she especially was very young. She was about 6 or 7, and because of her learning difficulties she was even that much younger, really, mentally and emotionally. So there must have been something, definitely. And I think that the emotional neglect side of things definitely did transfer onto my eldest after I left. Certainly when he moved in with his girlfriend, 100%. That's what I got from her anyway.
A
Yeah.
lot of times what happens, because I know I grew up in a very abusive, my father was alcoholic and beat up on my mom. So I think one of the many things that created my transition, or me wanting to run away from who I was I wanted to create a protector, and I became my protector. So I was wondering if, what kind of relationship she had with her dad, and possibly seeing that abuse, even though it wasn't physical, but she probably got some feelers out there. So it's like you learn to create that protector. And then you mentioned that she was sexually molested. So that's another line of protection
Mm.
that one does.
Well, I also
Yeah.
wanted to ask you if you could take us to the, like, when she first came into this world, right? When you first had your little baby girl, your first child, your husband saw his daughter for the first time. What was that like? Was she like doted upon? Was she like, was, I mean, can you take us back to that time?
Yeah, gosh. Um, yeah, it was amazing, really. I always had this slight worry that I wouldn't be a good mum, only because I've never really had a very good relationship with my own mum. I wouldn't say she's a bad mum at all, but we don't get on, we don't gel. We're not on that emotional connection sort of thing, and I worried that I wouldn't be able to know how to get onto that emotional level and have that bond with my own kids. But I didn't have to worry at all. It was just so instant and just so overwhelming. I loved being a mum. From the minute I found out I was pregnant, I loved the idea of being a mum. And when she arrived, gosh, yeah, it was just the most amazing thing ever. It's the best job in the world, and it's still the best thing I ever did, even with all the nightmare that I go through on a day-to-day basis now. I wouldn't change it for the world. Yeah, and especially having a little girl. I mean, we found out the 20-week scan, and although I told all my friends, oh, I don't mind, what the sex is, but secretly, I was really chuffed that
Super
I was
excited.
having a girl, especially the first time around. I thought I want at least one daughter. um, and so when I found out that she was a girl, I was especially excited, I think. So I enjoyed dressing her up in pretty things. And when my younger one came along, there's only about 15 months between them, so I used to treat them like twins, and I'd get matching outfits for them both. And their hair was always really pretty and in bows. And yeah, and they were both really, really good, especially my oldest one, actually, especially. She was really girly, and lapped it all up. She loved it. And I probably bought them makeup sets earlier than I should have done, when they were about sort of 8 or 9 for Christmas, the little eyeshadow sets and things, and the little lip glosses. So yeah, I loved the fact that I had two girls. And because despite being a tomboy myself during my early teens, when I did come out of that phase, I really did embrace my femininity and being a woman, and especially now since, you know, coming out of the relationship that I did, and becoming a rad femme, really, if you like, and a real powerhouse for women and women's rights. It's especially so that, you know, I want to make the world a better place for women in general, but also for my own daughters to grow up in. Um, and I think that it's just going so far the other way now that it's just crushing. It's almost like we've gone back 100 years to the suffragettes, and it's heartbreaking. And it's especially heartbreaking that one of my own daughters is joining the fight against me and against women's rights. That's really sad as well, you know.
It's I've heard from other mothers that have contacted me in the past. It's almost like the same scenario. That the daughters were so girly; they enjoy wearing dresses. They enjoy the girly things. So when this whole thing "I'm a boy" came upon, the mothers were very confused. Like,
It's
you
out of
know,
left field,
like out of
right?
left field. It's like, where did this happen? Because like I know with me, my mom tried to push the whole girly thing, and I was like, get this stuff away from me. I never liked the girly stuff, so I kind of like rebelled. But in
Hmm.
your case, and in a lot of cases of the young girls that have the ROGD, is the complete opposite. They were girly, they embraced it, and then all of a sudden, out of left field, you know, they didn't like the girly stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any idea why that is, or
I don't know. I mean, when my eldest first sort of came out as trans, the, she still was very, very girly. The only thing that she did to herself to change herself physically was she cut all her hair off. But she was still in very girly clothes. Although looking back now, and now that I hear a lot of stories from other parents of trans children, especially parents of boys identifying as girls that do dress up girly, they wear a lot of the anime looking type outfits. So the anime skirts and the long socks that go over the knees. Well, when my daughter started identifying as a boy, she still wore girls' clothes, but she gravitated towards that fashion. So she ordered a lot of these types of anime skirts, little anime blouses, and the over the knee socks. Um, so it's funny how I look back, and at the time I thought that she's still so girly in the way she dresses, but actually I think that they do confuse that anime type stuff. I've heard that that comes into it a lot with the ROGD kids, male and female, that have this obsession with the anime cartoons and the way they look. She now does dress very masculine. When I say very much, just like a tomboy, really. I mean, a lot of the clothes are still from the girl section. They're just jeans, sort of lumberjack shirt type things. But it was me that forced that upon her, because I remember I was still affirming, and I was getting really frustrated with her and saying, you know, if you're saying that you're a boy, why are you still doing X, Y, and Z? You need to be all in or not at all, you know. And I was on the verge of peaking at that point. I was starting to research and I was getting frustrated. And I said, right, if this is what you want to be, right, then be it. But you're going to be at 100%. And I took her into her bedroom. I took down everything that was girly, her glittery mirror, her pinky pictures on the wall. I threw out all her girls' clothes and I said, right, what you've got left, you've got a couple of outfits. We'll go online, we'll do some shopping and get you some jeans and shirts and boys' t-shirts and stuff. But you are going, if you're going to do this, you are going all in. It's all or nothing, because I've had enough. I've had it up to here. And then I did that. And then about 2 weeks later, I peaked. And then I flipped and just went, oh God. But I've never stopped her from looking however she wants, because that doesn't really bother me. I mean, what bothered me is the fact that I was calling her he, him, and I was looking at a very obviously female person who was still wearing girly clothes. And I think if I look back, it was probably quite selfish that I was finding the pronouns that much harder, because my eyes were deceiving me and I needed my eyes to see more of what my brain was telling me to call her, which was he, him, and the boy's name. Um, and it just became so uncomfortable for me to do that. I needed her to change and become more masculine to help me, I suppose, and ease the I don't know whether embarrassment is the right word, but we would go out and I would introduce her as he, him, and with the boy's name, because I was using them and I had to use them all the time. It was, you've got to be all in when you support somebody, otherwise they get annoyed. And it was embarrassing that even if we went to the doctors and it was like, he's doing this and I'm looking at her and she's wearing a skirt and and these little pinky little girly blouses, and I was like, this just does not make sense. This is just so ridiculous. It's embarrassing. And so I think that was quite selfish of me to do that. But now she's still very masculine, and I feel like i've helped I've helped her become more masculine by doing that. I really have messed up actually over the last 18 months, looking back.
And that's why it's so important that you're sharing your story now and you're able to bring a perspective of other parents that are dealing with the same thing to know what not to do. And I think as society we create these stereotypes. So women are supposed to be a certain way and
Mm-hmm.
boys are supposed to be a certain way. And I think that we don't make room for that in between, for individuals that don't fit on either side of the fence and want to be their own person. And I think that is what has pushed this trans agenda where it is today. People, it's almost like, well, you shouldn't be too gay, so, or you shouldn't be gay, so let's here. We'll make you, if you're a boy that's very feminine, we're going to make you a girl, or vice versa. And I think that'll say, be careful what you wish for, because people, instead of being accepting and understanding that there's different ways of expressing, we've created this massive tidal wave that we're seeing today.
But it's
Yeah.
like in the 80s and 90s, you had gender bending going on, with so many, British artists like, what
David Bowie.
David
Bowie,
Bowie
yeah, Boy
and
George.
Boy George,
Yeah,
Duran Duran,
yeah, yeah,
all these different,
yeah.
and it was like, we knew Prince wasn't a woman, but Prince was very feminine in certain ways,
Mm.
and even had a lyric that said, "I'm not a man, I'm not, a woman," or something like that. I'm something in between. And people just looked at that. Yeah, if you do that,
Yeah,
it
because I'm
turns
trying to
on.
push it in.
So there was like a different approach to gender, although biological sex was never questioned, because we knew Boy George, although he was wearing makeup and had his hair, whatever, that it was still Boy George, and Boy George didn't call himself Girl George. So I mean,
Yeah, we
I
call them the
just think,
new
yeah,
romantics. Yeah,
yeah,
and you're right. And I
yeah.
think, I said it to my daughter today during one of our many arguments, our latest one today. And she was using the whole sex and gender. And I said, well, sex is binary. I said, but gender doesn't exist. Gender means personality. I
Hmm.
can't remember where I got that from. I think I got it from when I watched What is a Woman by Matt Walsh, who I'm not really a fan of in general, but I think he did amazing during that documentary. And he interviewed another guy that I'm really not a fan of in general on women's rights issues, but my Jordan Peterson. And he said, it's being called gender, it's being labeled as gender, but it isn't. It's personality and trend. And that's what the new romantics were in the 80s. It was a fashion, it was a trend, and these guys had a particular personality. They were possibly, more effeminate than your average guy, and so went down that road. But yeah, there was never any confusion. There was always a line, and everyone knew what they were, on the important side of things. But now, yeah, I mean, it is a contradiction in terms, because the trans, especially the trans youth, will have a go at us and call us transphobic for suggesting any kind of gender stereotypes at all. But yet they seem to be more obsessed with it than us, because why would you change sex if you didn't believe in sex as a binary? If you weren't born a girl, you wouldn't have to transition to be a boy. It wouldn't exist, unless there was a binary to begin with. You wouldn't have to go through the the awful, horrendous medical situation that you would have to go through as a transsexual person. I can't remember what the proper term for, if you medicalize your transition.
Yeah,
Um,
translation.
but, in order to do that, there has to be a binary sex to begin with. Otherwise, we'd all be fluid and we'd all be going, we're all
Yeah.
born with a penis and a vagina and could just get one out one day and the other out the next day. Wouldn't be an issue, but we are all born with one or the other. And so, you have to change it if you want to be the other. And especially with boys going to girls, they have to make such more of an effort
Yeah.
because it's easier for them, I think, because but harder at the same time. I can't imagine what it's like for a 13-year-old boy to go to school in a school skirt for the first time, or to go out to the mall in a dress, because a girl can go in jeans and a lumberjack shirt and just be a tomboy, whereas a boy goes in a dress. That is a huge statement. I do take my hat off to them to a certain degree, but surely they are embracing that gender stereotype just by putting on a dress.
And when you said earlier, that gender is personality, I've mentioned that way a long time ago that, sex and gender are the same thing. We've divided it now with this whole identity issue, but I truly believe that we all have different personalities and we're being shamed for showing our personality. And I think the trans individuals feed so much into the stereotypes and embrace those stereotypes, although they say they reject it, but they really don't, because it's like, okay, well, you're a girl and you're tomboyish and you enjoy doing boy things, so what? There shouldn't be boy things or girl things. People have personalities, wants and desires and likes and hobbies, and we should all be able to engage in that. This whole medicalization of this thing is very alarming and damaging because it's really going to affect not only your health, but it's going to affect the immediate people around you, future generations. And it's just we're seeing society decline completely. And I know you said you're not a fan of Jordan Peterson or Matt Walsh. I think they are bringing in a lot of very important points that a society without rules and like
Structure.
regulation and structure becomes what society is becoming now. So there's a reason behind certain things because there's got to be when you're walking a tightrope, you've got to create that balance because if you go way too much on one side, you're going to fall, or way too much on the other. So we've got to find that happy medium where we can live productive, functional, healthy lives. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with both of them on this issue. And, Matt Walsh really did bring hugely to the forefront just, the difficulty with going all out. That, there is then this issue. I mean, that this is what piqued me in the fact that, biological males are entering female safe spaces and their sports and erasing the word woman, taking it for themselves. That definitely is what piqued me as a women's rights activist and as a campaigner for, women to keep their safe spaces, whether it be in, domestic abuse refuges or rape crisis centres, prisons, sports, you know. But then I do, as a liberal, I do still have that, conflict in my mind that, if someone is truly trying to be their authentic self, then we shouldn't really stamp that out. But should it be at the detriment to an entire, well, 50% of the population? Because it does seem to work that way round. You don't see sort of trans men, so biological females, taking over men's spaces, because it doesn't work the other way around, really. Although my daughter once said to me in the school that she was using the boys' toilets, and me and the school both said, no, 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 no. No, you don't do that. Two reasons. One, you're making yourself unsafe, and two, those boys are going to be really uncomfortable. They don't want a girl in their safe space, where they're up to boys stuff and talking about, boys things and stuff, and then you just wander in. Um, but on the other side of it, it does get really, really toxic and really, really worrying. And my daughter and I touched on that today during our argument, and she said, well, I'd love to see, in women's sports, for example, a third category, or for toilets, a gender, boys and girls, and gender neutral. And I'm like, yeah, I'm all for that. I said, and why didn't you campaign for that? Go out there and fight for that. That's a really healthy thing to go and fight for, because then you're not fighting to invade men's spaces. You're not fighting to invade women's spaces. You're fighting for an entire third space. And the trouble is that I think all true trans people, that's what they would like, I think, and that's what they would fight for. It's the TRAs and the heterosexual white male allies of the trans community that are fighting to erase women. And it all boils down to misogyny in that. But that's a whole nother debate I could get into. But there is a
That's very
huge
true.
misogynistic underlay to all of this as well, which really doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I think, there's a debate, it's really hotly contested, about the true trans moniker and who is really trans and who is not, and I really do think that this whole ideology has been just overtaken by trans activists who have taken it, and in order to justify what they want to do, which is a very misogynistic type of ideology at its foundation, the very few people who really deal with gender dysphoria, whatever you want to call it, and I do think it's more of a mental like condition, and I do believe that many of the old school transsexuals would agree and say, yeah, there was something that just wasn't right within me, that I did what I did, but I would never want to usurp my right to exist over the right of 50% of the planet, because that's when you get into trouble. These older transsexuals, they just wanted to blend into society. They didn't have a movement. They didn't want to stir up any kind of activities, or, they just wanted to live in peace,
Yeah,
and blend into society.
yeah,
And I think society was making allowances for that. Even when you
Oh yeah,
transitioned in 2003, that there was like a, you wanted to bring awareness,
yeah. That's all.
just
Yeah,
that this is existing and it's
mm,
possible, but it's not something that is common.
right. It was very rare. When
yeah,
I transitioned in 2003, there might have been 4 or 5 trans guys. There was hardly, and that, there was more trans women, but they weren't vocal, they weren't loud, they weren't pushy. It's like a totally different atmosphere, totally different type of person or people,
yeah. I
so
totally, totally agree. And actually, that came into my mind just seconds before you guys said it. And the question that comes into my mind to ask you guys, I suppose, is: do you feel that the trans activists have actually nosedived the whole trans community that was largely very small, very indiscreet, and were
mhm,
just getting on with life, and the average Joe on the street was letting them get on with life because
mhm.
it it was so insignificant, and they like you say, they were very respectful of everybody and themselves, and just sort of got in through life. I mean, it's like, the gay and the lesbian community. You've got 99.9% of them that just, you wouldn't know it seeing them on the street, because they're not there with a banner on their heads going, I'm gay, give me respect, give me attention because I'm gay. But the trans activists have totally gone down that route, and I think that they have literally thrown a grenade right in the middle of the trans community, and they are doing them absolutely no favors whatsoever. In fact, they're probably destroying the community way more than anyone from outside the community is.
Exactly. I mean, all the work that was done to bring awareness and respect and allowing people to coexist have been ruined by these so-called trans advocates, because I don't even think they're advocates. These are individuals with a lot of mental issues, and they're seeking attention and they want everything their way at whatever cost. And then they started using children as a shield. And this is why we have this massive influx of children, because they're being groomed and they're being coaxed. And it's just, it's something that's so scary that most people couldn't even imagine. And we're
Well, I
dealing
think,
with people.
yeah.
They're not right, you know?
I
Go
think
ahead.
most of them, like you say, are, they either have some kind of issues, or they're very sexist, misogynistic, or they're just very, very misguided. But my theory is, and you can have your own opinion, is that it's grown out of a small and very powerful community of paedophiles,
Mhm.
and people that have other agendas, people that want to make a lot of money from big pharma, people that want children to be vulnerable, and to be got at in some way, shape, or form. It's going to be a small minority, but if that minority are very wealthy and very powerful, and are brainwashing other people to being on their side, whether it's knowingly supporting that kind of thing or completely ignorant to it, I can't see any other way that anyone would want to sexualize and children and make them so vulnerable and risk destroying the rest of their lives. I can't see any other way other than personal gain, be it money or sexual advantages. I can't see any other reason why they would. And unfortunately, they've just had so many people jump on the bandwagon, like you say, whether it's people that have underlying hatred for the community or women in general or kids, or people that just want to be kind, like I was. I mean, I still see myself as being kind, but just not a pushover anymore. And I've opened my eyes to it. Whereas, back when I first affirmed my daughter, I just thought, well, I can't do anything else. What, I would be, well, I thought it would be homophobic to be like that. And I was never, that's never been something that I've ever been. And so, I had a big hill to get over myself, um, to, to even look at stuff and do the research online, because, I felt like I was bigoted for doing it. But then, the more I watched, the more horrified I sort of became. But I do think that the TRAs have just made things so much worse. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I think is it me, or did it all start with JK Rowling? That was kind of when I noticed it a little bit, but then it probably was years after you guys had already clocked on that
Yeah,
came out. And
there's
that was
been a
really
lot of different
sexist.
waves. There've been a lot of different waves and different things that have added fuel to the fire. Like I mentioned earlier, I think Caitlin coming out, or I don't know if we were having the conversation before we went on, and then you had I think the Jazz Jennings um, episodes or series really like brought a lot what I like to call Munchausen syndrome mothers and
Mm,
parents that just really like glorified this. So now everyone thinks that their next kid's going to be the next I am Jazz, and they want to make themselves feel like they're the greatest parents in the world because they're supportive and look at me, I'm and it's like
yeah.
you don't
We didn't
realize that
have
you're
that in
setting
this
up.
country. No, I don't. Not many people have heard of Jazz Jennings because we don't. It's on an American channel that we don't access in this country.
Right.
But I do remember Caitlyn Jenner, and I remember thinking, "Oh, that's fabulous! She's living her authentic self. Good on her." And then it exited my mind as quick as it entered. It was like, oh, well, fine. Yep, no problem. I didn't really know much about Bruce. I can proudly say I've never seen a single episode of the Kardashians in my entire life. I'm not into that kind of stuff. I just think it's a little bit crude. So I'd never heard of him. But it was a little bit on social media, and I think he was on the front of a women's magazine, and won Woman of the Year. Which, now I think about it, it's like he'd been a woman for less than a year and won Woman of the Year. I just think that's really insulting. So I can imagine that probably piqued a few people back in the day. But again, over here on Little Turf Island, America was doing its thing, I think, before we were. Even though we had the Tavistock Clinic mutilating children from quite a number of years ago, we were so ignorant to it all for so long.
I know that back when I was first like considering transitioning, and that was back in like 2010, 11, and stuff like that. I would look into like anything that I could get my hands on social media that had to do anything with transition, anything that had to do with transsexuality. And I found like a bunch of shows on, like, I don't know, it's like a British 4 channel or something, I forget. Yeah, yeah. And they had like a show where it was like the real life, some kind of, living situation where there was a person who was actually trans. And, I was like,
Gosh.
whoa, or like a dating show that was like someone who actually was trans and then told the guys at the end of the show.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
remember
so
that. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, there was like this subtle
Mm,
um, kind of like introduction that was kind of like, in a way it was like preparing the ground, kind of like
yeah.
watering the ground before the actual movement began, because I really do think that this has been so politicized, both on the right and on the left. The left is like, you know, people should be able to express however they want to and live whatever they want. And then the right's like, no, but these are the strict guidelines of how people should live and should be. And I personally think that it's been like just taken over by political entities to make a fractured community become bigger of an issue for these political parties.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it runs the same line as an abusive relationship and an abusive person. They work in subtle things and they test the water and see what they can get away with, um, before they're all out, you know, pushing you around and God knows what else. Yeah, I mean, come to think of it, I remember going to pride marches years and years ago, and then I didn't go for quite a while because I had young children. And I took both my daughters to a pride march August last year, so I was still affirming my eldest, and I was, her cheerleader really. And we went to Pride, and looking back, the parades that were going past and the people that were coming up and talking to us, because she had a, a pride rainbow flag wrapped around her in a rainbow hoodie. Um, it was actually really, really distasteful for children. I mean, great for adults, and I'd still go as an adult myself. I don't know whether I would now. I don't know. But even last year going, I didn't have an issue with what I was seeing as an adult. But now looking back, I think, God, why did I take my kids there and think that that was a good idea? Because it's really not child friendly. Um, if it ever was, I don't know, but it does feel like it's changed over the last ten years or so.
And I think that the blue and the pink has taken over the flag in a way that was never intended for, LGBT representation, that it's become only trans. It seems like that lesbians have been pushed out of their spaces. They closed the bars, they closed their ability to gather and to be able to communicate with each other. And now it seems like the LGBT is like becoming the T movement or something. And, it's really
And I think
quite
it's
something.
changed a lot because I came out as a lesbian when I was 16. I would go out to the bars, and there was a very different atmosphere and environment than there is now. I mean, we weren't as loud and as proud, and we kind of like didn't politicize it. We knew who we wanted to be with, we loved, and we just wanted to be left alone. Now it's just such a different atmosphere that I think it's kind of like exploded to what we're seeing today. And it's like sometimes things are better left alone and less loud and less proud. And just, my mother would always say, whatever you want to do in the bedroom with someone, that's between you and that person. No one needs to know. That's not anyone else's business. Now we've got teachers bragging about things and trying to like literally indoctrinate kids, and Disney and all these things that it's like, wait, no, 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 we're treading here on very dangerous grounds.
And I also heard that Asda over there and Aldi have now rebranded their feminine hygiene products section to period products, people. I don't know.
Yeah, no
It's
longer
like,
Really?
feminine.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like it's no longer feminine hygiene anymore.
yeah,
And it's like things are just really over the top, over the
Yeah.
top with all of it.
Well, it's that whole erasure of the word woman, isn't it?
yeah.
Which, yeah, really does get my goat. Like I say, as a women's rights advocate, I don't know whether you've heard of um, the lady Kelly J. Keane, who over here, if you Google her, she's amazing. She's a massive. She runs Standing for Women, and she's a massive women's rights advocate. And she's very staunchly, trans women are men, trans men are women. She's staunchly, more so than me. But she's amazing as a person, and they sell t-shirts with woman and the dictionary definition of woman, adult, human, female, and stickers and things. And I ordered some stickers a little while back, and I always have a couple in my handbag. And I don't know whether you've seen on the news that one of our banks called Halifax just the other day was in the news because they're making all their workers put their pronouns on their badges. And there was some backlash on it, and the CEO of Halifax said, "Well, if you don't like it, then bugger off and go to a different bank." And in 48 hours, they lost over £145,000 worth of business. People
Well,
just said, "All right, then, yeah, I'm going to take my mortgage, I'm going to take my credit card, I'm going to take my bank account, and I'm going to go elsewhere." Well, we've got a Halifax in my local town, and I was in there earlier, and we walked past. I was like, "Oh, I've got a sticker in my bag," and I put a sticker on their door: "Woman, adult, human, female." So
yeah.
I still like to do my bit a little bit, but yeah, Kelly J. Keane is a massive campaigner for that sort of thing in this country.
The corporations have like decided to take this on because they think they're doing the woke thing, the the being cool type of thing, and they're not realizing that they're going to lose a lot of business because people are reaching their peak moment and they're getting tired of this. And we have the trans advocates to thank for this because they've like really pushed it way too far. And like what people decide to do with their life in their bedroom, what people decide to do as adults, that's their business. But when their actions start to affect other people, then it's everybody's business, and then we're in trouble. And
Yeah.
that's what being respectful. I mean, we may not always agree. People have different political views, and we could all be respectful and coexist and not try to waterboarding each other with what we believe in, and just try to like be as tolerating of one another without harming one another. And what I think this community has done, the trans quote unquote community, is that they're harming women, they're harming children, and all because they want to be self gratified. And that's when anything stops being good, when you're self gratifying and forget that you're not an island, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think then that, every time a big corporation does something like this, that it is kind of, doing us a favor as advocates that are trying to stop and prevent children from being transitioned and harmed by this, that it is helping to pique more people, especially parents of teen kids, and helping save kids' lives in the long run, do you think?
I mean, I think that they're after the almighty pound dollar, and they're looking for their pocketbook and for their stock, holders' interests and everything. And I don't think that they realize that what they're doing is just shoving it down everyone's throat to the
Mm-hmm.
to the degree that people are actually getting waterboarded by it all,
Yeah.
and they're getting tired of it. But as long as it makes them a profit, as long as medical industrial complex is getting fed and the pharmaceuticals are getting their millions, 1.3 million for each transition young person, I mean, it's, yeah,
Yeah, but I think it's like it's gonna rebound. It's gonna like be opposite of what they think it's going to be because
it
people
is.
will get tired of it, and more people are going to reach their peak moment and go, enough is enough, especially as their kids or their grandkids or their friends kids get pulled into this, they're going to go, whoa, wait a minute, enough is enough.
And where does it end? Because now we have gender affirming surgeries for kids that just want to go into some kind of non-binary existence. They don't even want, like,
Mhm.
for instance, a male to female doesn't even want the canal or whatever, and they just want to be able to be smooth down there. So they don't even have to have gender dysphoria. They just want to wear the clothing. And these doctors are like totally like, okay, we'll do whatever you want. You want nipples on your breasts? You don't want nipples? Okay, we'll do, So it's like people are just like going into these surgeries and they're not blinking in one way or the
Yeah.
other.
I think that this is the bad part of it, and it is really the only bad part of it, is the fact that unlike any other movement since the beginning of time, this movement requires people, kids obviously the most worrying demographic, but people in general, to have irreversible surgery and take medication that is going to change them irreversibly. We're not talking anymore about kids going down the park and getting drunk on vodka or cider, or even taking up smoking, which, in past decades has been, the worst thing that you can do for your health. Well, I can honestly say out loud that I would much rather my kids start smoking now than take testosterone any day of the week. And I never thought that I would ever find myself saying something like that. In fact, I'd probably rather than take some drugs, maybe not the really hard ones, but any of the softer ones, than to go down the road of taking testosterone, especially female to male. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but testosterone seems to be so much more um, poisonous and stronger than estrogen, and so it's
They're
harder for female to male.
they're both very damaging. Actually, estrogen is a lot more damaging because it's equivalent to or equated to cancer and all sorts of different things. That's why the hormonal replacement for females didn't go so well, because they were getting a lot of breast cancer, uterine cancer, and all sorts of things.
Oh,
Testosterone in a female body for long term causes a lot of bone problems, because the bones become brittle in a
yeah,
sense, and then it causes a lot of heart problems, clotting problems with both the estrogen and the testosterone. I find with myself, because I removed my ovaries, that I can't go without T. I tried. I mentioned before we went on, I've detransitioned, tried to detransition 6 times, and I don't have any ovaries. And I'm not going to put estrogen in my body because that's more damaging. So I have to take low doses of testosterone for the rest of my life, and that's creating a lot of issues. I have heart palpitations. My joints hurt incredibly because your body's not meant to carry these synthetics for long terms. And so these young women don't realize, yeah, it might be cool in the beginning and it gives you a lot of strength and all that stuff, but then you're going to have side effects. It's going to age you. You're going to have all sorts of diabetic issues, like pre-diabetic and eventually become diabetic, heart problems, stroke, cardiac issues, and people like me are damn if I do, damn if I don't. So I'm stuck
yeah,
for the rest of my life, you
I mean,
know.
it's like the Faustian deal, the deal with the devil, in the sense of like, okay, I'll give you what you want, but you're going to have to pay me later for what you get,
yeah,
because at the end of the day, it's going to destroy you. But I won't tell you that at first, because you want to know the good things that are going to happen, and yeah, good things will happen for you. You will get the ability to walk outside and not fear for your safety. You will be able to exist in a world where you can not fear for your life. But what's going to be the great exchange at the end? It's a shorter lifespan. It's osteoporosis on both sides of the transition scale. It's a constant um, life of imposter, that you can't really tell people about your past, because if you tell them about your past, then you have to recreate what you were, who you were, how you came, I mean, everything becomes like a charade.
one big lie, one
Yeah.
big, production with a lot of health issues. And then very few people are able to completely detransition, although many people are detransitioning, and detransition looks different for everyone. Um, but it's not as glamorous as these trans advocates want to make it seem, and
Yeah. Well, the latest podcast that Jen Speck did, I don't know whether you've heard of Stella O'Malley and
Oh yeah.
Sasha I, and they do
yes.
a podcast called Gender a Wider Lens. And their latest one they did just last week, Stella looked at the latest data, and we're currently up to 34,000 detransitioners.
Yeah.
On
And
our
those are just the ones that are out and in the limelight and putting their hands up and saying, "Yes, this is
Mhm.
me. I've detransitioned." They're not even the ones that are doing it quietly behind closed doors. And I don't know how many of them actually go back to their gender clinics and their doctors and say, "I've gone back on everything." And and this is another thing as well. How do these people get justice? I mean, I know that Richie, who is known as Tulip R on Twitter, an amazing guy, he's just started a lawsuit against the NHS over here in the UK. And every time there's any articles or he posts anything on Twitter, I'm always retweeting to get support and knowledge out there of him. But even when I posted something on there about him on the really supportive Facebook page that I'm on, so many of them came back and said, I hate to say this, but he was in his 20s when he did it. It's his own fault. And I found myself saying, it's like, yeah, but he was fed a lie, just like all our kids are being fed. It doesn't matter what age. I mean, I was 26 when I married my abuser. He fed me a lie. And I was a fully grown adult, and I stayed in it for over a decade within that lie. We're all capable of being manipulated and brainwashed. It doesn't matter how old we are. If the industry or the abuser, because I think that the big pharma and anyone who's really pushing for this, especially with children, they are abusive. It's
Mhm.
pure manipulation for their own gain. These kids are in an abusive relationship with these groomers, and it would just be lovely that my hope is that in the next 10 years or so, I mean, it's a sad hope to have, I know, but my hope is that all these kids that are being transitioned against their will or without all the information now that are going to go on to regret it will turn round and whip someone's backside, everyone's backside, hopefully, and there'll be lawsuits coming out of everywhere. I mean, I say the same about, child victims of domestic abuse and sexual abuse. That at the moment, the abusers that sadly statistics say is often the father. I'm not just saying that; the statistics say that, and they're getting away with it. That these kids will grow up having been placed with their abuser and continue to be perpetrated against, that they will sue the courts and they will sue social child protective services, or social services as they're called in this country. And it is a sad thing to hope for, because it means that there are victims and there has to be enough victims to make a difference. So it's a bittersweet thing to hope for, but I can't see anything else really turning it around in the way that we need it to be turned around to save these kids.
And that's what needs to happen. Is it's not just the children, which is very tragic. I think a lot of people, even as an adult, like I transitioned at 38, and I mentioned earlier that it was all based on trauma. You're trying to run away from your sexual molestation, the poor relationship you have with your mother or father, all sorts of different things that play into this. If you have a compromised nervous system, you're neurodivergent, autism, OCD, all these things that we have, and we think if we transition, everything's going to be great. Well, they sell you that lie and you fall for it. It doesn't matter if you're 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, you fall for it because you think it's your knight in shining armor. It's going to help your life and you're going to be better. Well, the years go by and you realize, wait a minute, I still have the same issues I had before I transitioned. And now I have more. I have medical issues. I've lost everything. I've lost myself because that self-hatred makes you like just want to get rid of everything that you used to be and create something new.
Hmm.
You know, and it's sad. And what's so sad is the majority of individuals that are part of the community, or have transitioned, don't realize that they are themselves a victim.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think also that in the case of your country in Great Britain and the UK, you have Tavistock. We have 300 plus
Mm.
different clinics around, that have been opening in the last 5 to 10 years. And Tavistock has a wonderful, like, opportunity if they really were compassionate towards these gender confused children, questioning children. Some would say that they have the records. They could keep just meticulous records of the 65 million that live in your country and be a great example of, a microcosm of the world for, other countries and other people in the
Hmm.
world. But they don't do that. They just,
No,
I mean, it took
well,
Kira
they
Bell for
do.
things to
Yeah,
change.
they do because they have to. It's not that they want to change things for how we would view the better, because that obviously isn't the better for them. But they are still run by the NHS, and like you say, they are the single and only gender clinic in this country. And so we do have a massive advantage in the fact that we can turn to them for the only stats in the whole that covers 65 to 70 million people. It is against their will, but they have to, under the law of the NHS, keep those kind of stats. And every time they're released, I always post them onto Twitter. I think we're currently at 8,000 teenage girls that have been referred, and the graph just, it's a little bit sort of steady, and it rises a little bit, and then by sort of 2014, 2015, it just spikes. And now it's, I think it's up to 2021 or 2020 at the moment, and it's off the charts. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, and that doesn't even cover the kids that haven't yet got round to doing the referrals, and the mothers like me and fathers that have got trans identifying kids that haven't done that referral and are desperately trying to stop that from happening. So that's I would say, a fraction of what is actually going on in this country alone, and we're tiny. I mean, you could fit about 15 of us into Texas alone, so I've heard. And so I can only imagine the scale that you guys have, and every state has its own governance and its own way of doing things and its own gender clinics. I mean, it's just an absolute minefield over there. I can only imagine. I do
And
really,
why
really
is it?
sympathize.
Yeah, why is it an Anglo country issue? Because it's in Great Britain, it's in the United States,
Canada.
Australia, New Zealand, but anywhere else, like what Matt Walsh went to,
Yeah, he went to
visit
Right
Africa.
Africa,
away.
and
Yeah.
it's like it's unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, in societies like in North Korea, in Japan, it's like it's not something that
Yeah,
is common. I mean, they cosplay and gender play and stuff in those Asian countries, but it's not like it is in these Anglo countries, and it just seems to
yeah,
be like an issue of affluence. I don't know,
Affluence.
like we
Yeah.
have too much time on our hands or something. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Something like
yeah.
that.
I mean, TRAs would have you believe that we are a more liberal part of the world, and we're more forgiving, we're more open-minded, and that I mean, my daughter's argument is, there's so many trans people now because they feel safer to come out, and that is a big sort of TRA way of looking at it. My first thought when I watched the Matt Walsh's documentary was just the culture. I mean, I don't know whether you remember that scene when at the beginning of his interview with the African tribe, when the African music came on, I just immediately felt so calm. I remember I
Hmm.
closed my eyes. I think it's sort of maybe not the first time I saw the documentary, but sort of subsequent times, because I've seen it a number of times. And it just makes me want to close my eyes and just take in that music, because it's just amazing. I love African music. I think, how
Hmm.
could you, want to be anything but yourself with when you've got that music
Exactly.
playing on a daily basis? Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just unheard of. But yeah, TRAs would have you believe, well, no, they are there. They've always been there. They're just scared, and it's really really difficult because I believe that when it comes to the LGB community, that they've always been there, probably since the dawn of time. There was probably at least one gay man in Jesus's flock. Not that I'm religious; I'm actually atheist. But you know, if it was around,
Right.
that there probably was at least one gay man in his tribe. But so there probably has always been trans people, but this the number is so small.
Right. I think
What
that
you
there
think?
have been people in the world that may have like expressed their two spirit nature. They might have taken the role, like in the village, if they were born a man, but they felt more feminine, and they took the role that females would take. But I don't think there has been this kind of thing in the past. There's no journal history on that. There's nothing. If something like this would have been around, it would have been in the medical journals. They would have talked about it, especially with the children. There would have been so much suicide because
Yeah.
people couldn't live with their own self. So they would have. You don't hear any of that. Nothing is written of that.
They said the first modern documented transsexual was an American lady in the 1920s, and it was the
Hmm.
what the movie The Danish Girl was based on.
Hmm. Exactly.
And the story I've heard, in fact, it was in Abigail Schreier's book, I'm sure of it, and everyone was really open-minded and really celebratory of. I can't remember what her name was in the end. I have seen The Danish Girl, but I can't remember what
Lily
her name was.
Alba.
Lily
Lily
But they
Allen.
Alba.
they were so embracing of it. Apparently, when she came back from Europe, where she had her medicalization, her surgeries, and landed back in the States, that she was met to, a huge crowd, and they, really embraced it and said, well done you, and she made loads of money and things. I don't think that her life ended very very well in the end, probably from the hormones and stuff. But I certainly didn't get that impression that her life was in any danger from openly transitioning and stuff. I'm sure
Well, I
that
think you're talking.
go
Oh,
on.
go ahead.
No, no, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I think the GI from the United States who went to Denmark to get the surgery was who was that person? What was their name? I mean, they
Jorgensen.
Jorgensen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jorgensen was the American soldier who then transitioned. And back then, I remember that when Dr. Henry Biber was doing transsexual operations and stuff like that, it was literally men coming to Colorado, to Trinidad, Colorado, to have their sex change operation, and then they would somehow magically leave as women, but they had never lived as women. It was like this like overnight
Eugenics.
kind of thing, and it
Mhm.
was it was so like it was so strange because I mean it was like this freakish type of
Experiment.
experiment
Yeah.
or something. And like with Christine Jorgensen,
Mhm.
it was like the GI comes back from World War II and then transitions into becoming a woman. And then, they did all these pressers and everything in the United States, but it was still a freakish thing
Mhm.
to behold, right? Nobody was really on board with it. It was kind of like this circus act, the bearded lady from circus times of the past. But I really do think that it's been taken and utilized by a larger agenda to make it into what it is today. And I think it's part of like the dehumanization of people.
Transhumanism.
Yeah, it's more like the next step to like taking away from what it is to be male, what it is to be
Be a woman.
female,
Yeah. Mhm.
what it is to procreate on the planet, what it is to be human. I think we're losing our humanity in the sterilization of our youth,
yeah,
because there won't be humanity over here in these parts to be able to have, we're going to have like, I don't know,
Yeah.
some
Well,
something out of Mad Max or
Yeah,
yeah,
something.
I've said that to my daughter, and her response, in fact, it was just today, and her response was, "Well, the world is overpopulated, so it will be
which,
a good thing." She's got an answer for everything.
yeah, they
Well, at
do.
13, I
Yeah.
mean, everybody, they think they know everything about the
I think it's a
world.
Marxist agenda, and people don't realize it. That it's just this whole new brave new world, and it's not very. It's very evil, if I could use a word. And people need to really become aware of what's taking place, and parents need to really watch for the signs. That's why it's important what you're saying, so that they could prepare themselves and try to make different decisions. So we've kept you up, and I know it's late where you're
Yeah.
at. If you,
Yeah.
what message do you have for those parents that will be dealing with this in the future? And I think there's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of more parents that are going to be dealing with this. What advice would you have for them? And also, as far as like the domestic violence, you know, tie that all in. Like, if mothers are dealing with this, what should they do before it affects their kids? So if you could kind of like,
Oh, yeah, that second one's a tough one. But the first one, I mean, I would say trust your gut and your instinct, do your research, don't take anything on face value, especially if it's from, your children, so young people. There's often a script. They've picked things up from friends at school or from these people online. They follow a script. Don't let them manipulate you and scare you. Um, and yeah, look around you. I mean, my child has got 4 friends at school that are all trans as well, all girls that are identifying as boys. It just doesn't happen. And at first I swallowed it all. It's just ridiculous. But my gut was always there. And I think, follow your gut instinct. I think as a parent, we know our children the best, and we know if there is a history. Quite often you hear parents that of LGB children, that when the children finally come out, it's such a big deal to the child or the young person or the young adult whenever they come out. And the parents often turn around and say, "Yeah, I know. I've known for ages," and there's always that inkling. And I think it probably is the same with trans, because if someone that truly is born in the wrong body, then it is what it is on the tin. They are born into the wrong body. They're going to behave that way from very, very early on. But just don't rush anything. And I think when it comes to medicalization, I think that they need to change the way that they're doing it right now, because the current procedures are not working. Synthetic cross-sex hormones are not the way forward. There has to be another way. I always think, yeah, I'm all for them looking into another way, because there are true trans people out there that will benefit for the rest of their lives by going down this route, and it has to be safe and it has to be healthy for them. Um, but there's so many things that are going wrong in that journey. The lack of therapy, the lack of exploring, like you say, Mark. The history, any trauma that the child or young person or even adult has been through, any learning difficulties that they have. So 40% are on the autistic spectrum, or have other learning difficulties, ADHD and the likes. These things have to be explored. So I would say, yeah, in a nutshell, do your research, follow your gut instinct, and don't allow yourself to be manipulated and have scare tactics used on you. I think, in as far as domestic abuse relationships, that's really, really tough. And I always say, as an advocate, and I say this to other professionals that I work with or come up against usually, and to the victims and survivors I work with, that no one is more of an expert on their own abuse and their own safeguarding of that abuse than the victim. A lot of these people don't make it out alive, and that's the reality of it. And I probably wouldn't be here now. I don't think he would have killed me, but I would have possibly killed myself by now. And the law is not on our side right now. in any of the Western world. I don't think anywhere in the world actually, because most of us are women, and the law is often not on women's side in general. I think we have a long, long way to go, but I think the main thing is that children are not they're not witnesses; they are victims in their own right, and as primary victims, as mothers usually, and some fathers, we need to recognise that we're not just saving ourselves, we're saving our children. But what you come up against after you leave is sometimes even worse than what you come up against before you leave. And I found that, and I know many other victims find that. I know that's probably not very helpful on that side. I'm still trying to figure out family court myself. It's the twilight zone in America and in the UK. It really is. And we have no way of controlling it at the moment. I hope that changes,
I'm,
but
I'm glad that you're still here,
Yeah.
that, because your daughter needs you. I know it's hard. I know that what you're dealing with is really hard, but in the long run, you're going to be her rock, and you're very important, and I know I was in that household where my dad beat up my mom, and it was horrible, horrible. And so my heart goes out to you because I was raised in that, and my heart goes out to any woman who has to deal with that, and especially what women are dealing with right now, that they're trying to be erased or they're being erased, by whatever agenda is out there. So thank you so much for being you, for being here, for being a great mother, for loving your child. No one's ever told you that you matter and you are important and you are needed. So,
thank you. I'm trying. I am trying my best, as we all are. Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much for having me on and giving me a voice. It's been lovely chatting. I just
it's
hope
been,
that, yeah, that someone can learn something. Like you say, even if it's learning from my mistakes, that's great. As long as they learn. And, yeah,
that's the
100%.
key. So, Lita, is it?
Lena,
Lena
yeah.
says, go ahead and read what it says.
I always thought non-hormone transitioning should be the standard.
You know, and to that I say, well, like most people, that butch lesbian, the really feminine man doesn't even have to be gay. There's a lot of feminine men that are not attracted to the same sex, have been like living life like that, and I think that's wonderful that people should be able to express their personalities. And I think if we would be allowed to do that, we wouldn't
Mm.
be down this rabbit hole that
Yeah,
we're in right
I was going to
now.
say exactly the same thing. It's not the social transitioning; it's what that means long term, and it's the medicalization and the surgeries that is the dangerous and terrifyingly real part of it. If that didn't exist and our medical area had no idea how to do anything like that, and it just did not exist, then it would be fine for anyone to just, identify however they want to, because we are liberal people. And this is mainly happening to very liberal, former left wing, who are now politically homeless, white middle class families, suburban families. We are not bigots. As much as the TRAs would like to have people think, we're not bigots, we're not transphobes, we're not I mean, I proudly call myself a TERF, but not in the way that the TRAs like to think that we are. um, we are normal people that are just trying to stop people from having irreversible damage done to their bodies and minds, um, under a lie, under a guise. If they knew everything and still did it, fine, and they were an adult, you know. But most people are fed a lie, and that's the harrowing bit. So yeah.
Any other questions for me? No. All right, thank you so much, Taylor, and thank
No,
you
thank
everyone for
you.
tuning in. Guys, remember to subscribe, hit that notification button. There's a lot of great guests coming up for the following weeks. Thank you so much, Taylor.
Yes,
We,
thank you.
we hope and pray the best for you and the great outcome. And I believe that everything is going to smooth itself out. It usually does. It's crazy. Yes, finger crossed.
Yeah,
Always.
yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Take care. Have a good day.
Take care. You too. Bye bye. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We love you, but remember to always love yourselves too and each other. Bye bye.